Left 4 Dead is a game that is known for its extreme difficulty on the highest setting. The game was designed with having 4 actual players in mind, but since I have absolutely no friends, we're going to be bringing some bots in instead and hoping they can get the job done. So it's time for the loudest noise in all of gaming, as we start off with Dead Center. And this campaign is a little bit unique because it starts you off without a primary weapon, which every other campaign in the game does start you with. So, despite having melee weapons here, I'm going to be taking the pistols just so that I have a ranged option at all, but we won't be sticking with them for very long since melees are super helpful, especially in solo settings. But the beginning here isn't too bad. These zombies don't really notice you as long as you have your flashlight off and you just stay in the hallways. So I'm able to just run past most of the stuff, and initially I start off trying to rush. The main reason for this is because there is a 30-second or so timer before special infected start spawning, so you can make a bunch of distance if you run past the starting zombies instead of killing them. But I learned pretty quickly that the bots were not going to be having any of that. So I just hid in this room until they eventually caught up, and I was kind of lucky here actually because there was a pretty good chance that they just got killed by fucking nothing because they're stupid. So yeah, the bots are going to give us problems later on, but right now I haven't really caught onto that yet, so I'm just letting them catch up. A little while later, we are just before the elevator, and we have a smoker and a spitter here, but I'm able to take them out with the pistols. This game is kind of interesting because whenever you're moving, you get a big penalty to your accuracy, but if you sit still, and even more so if you crouch, you get much better accuracy, and you can actually laser stuff down, even with the weakest weapons in the game. And this was something I didn't know as a kid when I was playing this game, which made me miss all my shots. But not too long after that, we were in the elevator doing pretty well. I still haven't even taken any damage. And as the doors open, I tossed a boomer bile to keep the commons off me and my teammates, and grabbed the primary weapon as soon as I could. Boomer bile is one of the most overpowered things in this game, keeping the horde off of you for 15 seconds I believe, and it's basically just super good at handling horde events like this one, where a horde is guaranteed to be spawned. But you shouldn't throw bile if there isn't a horde because it'll spawn one otherwise. And here I grabbed the shotgun, which I much prefer as far as the early tier weapons, so we'll be using this until we get some better tier weapons later on. And nothing really of interest happened on the way here, so we made it to the safe room. Coach, hurry your dumb bot ass up, please. There we go. We made it for real now. And outside the next safe room, I started by clearing out all of the zombies in the area. It's pretty easy to get hit by these guys, and at this point I'd already learned my lesson at the beginning of the last mission that I shouldn't be rushing, and I'm gonna have to protect the bots. And I elected not to take the route for the guaranteed melee weapon. And it's just because you can avoid a bunch of commons by doing that, which would let me get a little bit farther ahead before the specials start. It's nice to deal with the specials out here in the street instead of back in the area before it, because you have a much more open space, which is definitely preferable for handling specials. A little bit later, and we finally get access to our first melee weapon, the axe. And it's a sharp melee weapon, which is going to come in handy a little bit later. On the way outside, I grab a gas can because they are pretty useful for stopping commons whenever they come at us. And it would also be nice if we get a tank because burning the tank is one of the best ways to take them down. But I know that there's a big crowd here, so I just set off the gas tank there, and then I go run up here and piss off all the commons so that they run into the fire because they're about as smart as our bots. I'm taking everything pretty slowly, and I kind of have to with the bots. I have actually beat this game on expert with other players before just using the matchmaking system, and it was actually kind of fun. As it turns out, the game is old enough now that most of the people playing the hardest difficulty are kind of good at it. So I was forced to play a lot slower than I'm used to, but it did end up working out for me. But we are in the easiest campaign of the entire game, so that might have to change later on. We'll see. And as I climb over the dumpster here, we see the tank. And I probably should have saved one of those gas cans for him because I have no way of lighting him on fire now. So I start making distance, and one of the things that the bots are actually really good at is running away and shooting the tank. As long as you keep them running away, they will just keep shooting the whole way pretty much, and they tend to laser down the tank really effectively. I have to be careful of my friendly fire, but the bots obviously don't because they don't have friendly fire. So a lot of the time the tank fights aren't actually that bad, even though the tank would one-shot in-cap me if it hit me. As you can see, it does with Ellis there. And one thing I ended up learning a little bit later on is that the bots will stick with you for the most part until somebody goes down. Then they act like dumbasses, but Coach is just such a giga chad, he's just sitting here tanking it. Look at this guy, he's just staring the tank head on. Despite this coming really close, Rochelle getting killed by the tank, he's really low health, so we kill him and I'm able to get my teammates up and keep on going. Since we're not playing on realism, Rochelle dying isn't the end of the world because we'll be able to pick her up a little bit later in a closet. But if you guys do want to see me come back to this on realism, or maybe on a mutation like Last Man on Earth, maybe even as a live stream, let me know in the comments down below if you'd want to see that. And here we get into this room, which gives us access to our first tier 2 weapons and a new melee weapon. I don't know why, but I really like the knife, even though I know a lot of people think it's bad. But I don't know, I just get the most consistent hits with it feels like, so I picked it up and used it. I also grabbed an auto shotgun here, and I figured it's a good time to say that I do have a couple of workshop mods, but all they're doing is changing these skins on the weapons. So it's going to be the same as normal vanilla gameplay. I just like the work of modders, they're pretty cool. So we grab the auto shotgun and we have our melee weapon, and this is a very strong setup for solo gameplay, since these shotguns are easily the highest DPS weapons in the entire game. So much so to the point that they actually have a special nerf to tanks specifically, because they would melt them down too quickly otherwise. But they still do similar damage to the other weapon classes, so they're still very good against tanks as well. And a little bit later, we make our way into the gun shop, which is this game's tutorial that lets you just kind of pick whatever gun you want. It just has every gun in the game in here. They even added the newer guns added to the game later into a little closet. But we're going to be taking the other auto shotgun, the tactical shotgun I think, or the combat shotgun. It's the SPAS 12, yeah, that one. So we picked that up, we put a laser on it because that'll definitely tighten the spread on our shotgun, that's the way it works. And just like that, we were ready to go to the market and grab a cola. And normally you really want a boomer bile for this event because it is a very tricky one and I don't have one. So I went into it pretty scared, I waited for my bots to catch up to me, and then I just ran in the store as fast as I could and started going for the cola. Fortunately, I do have a pipe bomb which helps, but the horde is going to be infinitely spawning, so killing them basically won't do anything with the pipe bomb, which is why the bile is so good for this type of event. I did have a charger come, but fortunately, the bots had me covered and I didn't even have to drop the cola to kill it. So I threw the pipe bomb out the door so that I wouldn't get blocked by the commons, grabbed the cola, and started running through. And this was a very scary part of the game, but fortunately we made enough of a gap to be able to get through, and I beelined it towards this van, which is a little bit of a shortcut to get back to the spot solo. If you're doing this with other players, you can actually just toss the cola up over the bushes and another player can be nearby the door, and you can do it even faster like that. But I had to stop and do this because I was starting to get swarmed, so I was definitely stressed out here. Eventually I make enough of an opening, I grab the cola and I toss it up top. This way I have my gun ready to go as I'm coming back up there. That way, if I get grabbed by a special, I'm more likely to have some counterplay against it than having to drop the cola first. But we're able to get it into the slot, and Whitaker opens up the path for us, letting us get to the safe room. And somehow we made it through that crescendo with no bile, and without losing any health. Although the same can't be said for the bots, but that's okay. They're stupid. And after a little bit more chaos in this situation, we were ready to make the final push to the safe room and get into Chapter 3. And this is the third of 4 chapters for Dead Center, which is a little bit unique because most of the other campaigns have 5 chapters instead of just 4. But I decided to exhibit my bot-like behavior here after getting stuck on these racks and getting destroyed by spitter goo. So we're off to a great start with this one, obviously. Fortunately, they were pretty much at the falling end of all of the horde anyway, so my bots were able to get me up and we were able to continue. I didn't want to have to take our first restart of the run to something stupid like that. So with a couple of specials destroyed later, we made it to the food court, where I tossed a pipe bomb because I managed to find a bile bomb laying on the ground. And this was really important because we were going to have a major crescendo event that's even harder than the last one we did. So it was really helpful to have this bile moving forward, and I was going to hold on to it for that at all costs. And here I encountered a smoker and tried to do the swag strat of cutting the tongue with a sharp melee weapon, but I failed, got caught, and had to get saved by my bots, and was now down 30 health. So that's fun, but I'll hit that strat later, and it feels so good when you do, but it is a very tight timing. And a little bit later on, we hit the emergency door, which is the crescendo event we were talking about earlier. So we're going to have an endless horde until we climb up 3 stories in the mall. So I tossed a bile jar, although in hindsight, I tossed this way too early. I definitely should have tried to wait a little bit. And because of this, the zombies are not distracted as I'm funneling through the choke point in here with a bunch of them spawning. Fortunately, I'm able to turn it off just as I get taken out by a jockey, but my bots were close enough to save me just as I was one more tick away from going down. So things are really close right now. At this point, we're just cleaning up the remainder of the horde that had spawned in, and I'm letting the bots revive our teammate who went down as well. But I just locked down this doorway so that they only had to watch one direction, which is basically the only thing they're good at. And of course, I caught mine for talking shit about them as I get hit by this one common and go down after nobody else is here. A little bit later on towards the end, we have this little situation where our teammates get grabbed by a charger and there's a smoker sitting in the back trying to get us too. I think I actually accidentally cut the tongue there just because I was meleeing the charger anyway, but I thought it was kind of funny so I included it here. But that was pretty much all that was left over of the level, so we were able to get into the safe room and move on to the final level of Dead Center. And I held onto that bile, which would prove to be useful for this finale, because we want to distract the commons while we go and grab 8 gas tanks. And this is actually a nice part of single player, because in multiplayer you would have to get 13 tanks instead, which obviously takes a lot longer. So I employ the strat of throwing the cans one at a time, that way I can transport a bunch of them at once instead of just one at a time like you might have been intended to. My plan is to just grab all the tanks and throw them off towards the car, and then go and put them in all at the same time, preferably with an adrenaline if I'm able to get one, but if I can't, it's not the end of the world either. And I'm able to pull this off pretty much without a hitch. I also found a pipe bomb while I was grabbing all the tanks, so at this point I just need to consolidate the tanks all to one spot, and then go and start popping them in. And now that they're all here, I pop my adrenaline and start putting them into the tank. And my teammates are starting to go down, but hopefully I'm fast enough to just take care of this and get out of here. Remember, they're bots, so it doesn't matter if they make it, because they're not people. A saying more true than ever in our current age of AI. But a tank spawns, and yeah, even though I got the can in, you could see it's at 8 out of 8. Since I was down, it didn't count me as being in the rescue vehicle. So this was going to be a reset, and the first death of the run. But fortunately, in my next try, I was able to get it done, and this time I did the exact same thing again, but expected different results. So, you know, something that works all the time. All we had to do was pile up all of the tanks back against the car, and this time things would work out for us. Once again, it was just on the heels of the tank spawning, but fortunately we were a little bit faster this time, and I was able to get all of the cans into the car, but we did get trolled by the special infected before I could finish, because this spitter spit on us, making me have to leave, and at some point I blasted one of the cans up on top of a roof, so I went and grabbed this one that I left laying here, and we were able to replace it without losing too much time. But yeah, this part was done now, and ultimately getting out of dead center wasn't too bad, all things considered. After all, expert is literally 4 times harder than the next easiest difficulty, advanced, so I was expecting the worst. And here we are on to the next mission I decided to do, Swamp Fever. This is the other of the 5 campaigns that is only 4 missions long, and it's kind of known as being one of the easier ones, so I decided to do this one next, because it just made sense to start off easy and ramp up getting harder. Fortunately this time though, we get to start off with primary weapons, which makes it a lot nicer. However, unlike the other campaigns, this one probably has the hardest first mission of all of them, but that's mostly because most first missions are easy, and this one just happens to have a crescendo. And after knocking the shit out of this charger with my bare hands, we were ready to start the boat crescendo, where we had to call over this boat ferry thing. And in the meantime, I went and picked up a new weapon for some ammo, and then went to the hiding spot, which was going to be up in this building. Since I had a bile, I was pretty confident that we'd be able to get through this without too much issue, and on top of that, there was even a pipe bomb that I was going to try to take into the next area because a bunch of zombies spawn all at the same time after the boat. But unfortunately, a while in, a boomer was able to get onto my teammates, and this meant that the bile was no longer effective, and it also spawned another horde, because of course it did. But we were already in a decent spot to hold out, so this wasn't that big of a deal. But it did become a problem when my teammates were stuck on commons and got hit by a spitter, destroying all of their healths. Like I said, the bots are kind of stupid. The devs even knew that the bots were going to be stupid and made them take reduced damage from spitter goo, but on expert, it's still just a ton of damage. Unfortunately, somebody went down while I was trying to run away, and since the bots will never leave somebody behind, we couldn't just leave them behind, I had to go back and save them. So after winning a little 1v1 with a charger here, I eventually went back in to save them, but ended up getting swarmed by another horde out in the open, and ended up going down for it. The commons do 20 damage per hit if they're in front of you, so you can go down really quickly to them. Fortunately though, the bots got their shit together and came and revived me, and we were able to hop onto the boat finally. Not after getting a little bit of justice against the boomer though. But I did go and look for some throwables and stuff before leaving, and was able to find these pills that helped out. Because the boat is such a long downtime, all of the specials spawn at once here, so I had to be ready for them, as well as a big group of commons here, which is why I brought a pipe bomb. I also was carrying a gas can, so that way I could deal with a tank if we had one show up, since at this point we hadn't had one, but certainly could now. And of course we eventually run into the tank, and he spawns right next to a gas can anyway, making it really silly that I brought this one. But hey, it's still more damage to have another fire on him, so it doesn't hurt. Plus we're in the swamp, so if he hops into the water, he's going to lose the fire anyway, so having more doesn't hurt. For now though, my goal is to just keep the bots away from him, and also keep him up here on the bridge where he'll keep burning, but he's a smart little tank and hops into the water. But now that he's down there, it's hard for him to reach us, and he mostly just tries to throw rocks at us from stupid angles, so we're able to kite him down without too much of a problem. And from there, it's a pretty boring walk into the safe room without too much else happening. So we're ready to get into mission 2. And we start off the next chapter strong, getting a horde right away. Fortunately, I find a pipe bomb, and I'm carrying a boomer bile that I want to carry into the next crescendo event, which we're going to be getting to here pretty soon. And I hit this pretty nice snipe on a smoker that starts pulling me, which I was super proud of. Of course, a hunter showed up right after, but fortunately my teammates actually saved me quickly, which is pretty rare for the bots if you've played this game with bots before, so I'll take it. And we were finally at the plane, and I got access to my beloved auto shotgun. And upon leaving, I see a witch right in front of me, so I go for the crown on her because I know my teammates would die to her, and I die to her, so not my best idea. And on our way back this time, we had a tank fight halfway through where I had a really scary spot here that I had to use my adrenaline on. I didn't have anywhere to go here, and I was going to have to run through water, which slows you down, so I popped my adrenaline and was able to successfully juke out the tank. And after a little bit, we were able to successfully kill him, and there was also a convenient adrenaline on my way back to the plane that I could take, so that's nice. And this time, there just wasn't a witch, so it wasn't too difficult for me. I tossed the bile, and we got to run past pretty much the entire horde here. And I made it into this shack that had 2 health kits, and I was going to wait around for my bots to catch up to me and let them use them. A little bit later on in the mission, we find another boomer bile, which will be great because there is yet another crescendo in the next mission, so we can hold on to it for that. And this is made even more clear as the best choice because this is swamp fever and there's water everywhere, so having a Molotov for the tank isn't that big of a deal. And with nothing else left, we made it to the safe room and we're ready for the next level. And we start off the next mission with a little bit of chaos, where a horde spawns and I set off a gasoline tank to block most of it. Our lovely bot decides to get ridden by a jockey into the fire, and Ellis decides to be a moron and just take a bunch of damage to it too. So maybe it wasn't the best idea, but it ended up working out. It did kill a lot of zombies. But hey, don't worry, since they're bots, they'll use their medkits right away instead of waiting until they've taken some more damage before using it. And just on our way out, I own this charger. I just thought that was funny. And once again, I'm carrying this gas can around through the level in the hopes that it'll be useful against a tank later on, since I don't have a Molotov and I don't have access to a teammate with a Molotov. And sure enough, the tank spawns in this area and I'm looking for him to set up the gas can on him. But while I'm doing that, this smoker gets the most disgusting snipe on me I've ever seen. I mean, look at this angle, dude, what is this? Talk about a head glitch. And yeah, I end up taking a damage tick from him before my teammates can save me, but it's not the end of the world. I'll just use my adrenaline once the tank gets close. We are able to light him on fire because he happened to just walk right over the gas can for us. So 1 adrenaline down and a bunch of kiting later, and the tank was taken care of. And a little bit farther into the level, we encounter the world's loudest hinge ever. We are lowering this plank down, and if you go on it really quickly, you can actually hop up onto the roof of the next building, which is a pretty good spot to set up and kind of regroup everybody. From here, I decide to throw a bile with the hopes of running through the crowd, but my teammates won't have any of that. So I end up actually being stuck here for a really long time dealing with the horde, until eventually we're able to just clear everybody out. And this was definitely a super annoying section because if I was with real teammates, we 100% would have just run past everything like nothing. But fortunately we were able to get through this part without dying, so I guess it's not the end of the world after all. Of course, on the way out, I managed to fail the smoker trick yet again and take another 30 damage hit before my teammates saved me on the way out of here. And with that, we made it to the safe room and we're ready to push into the final level of Swamp Fever. And this is the Plantation House. 3 of the 5 missions in the base campaign have holdout style finales, and this is one of them, and I would also consider it to be the easiest. That said, it does have a pretty special twist that we'll get into once it comes up. We'll just start the finale, and of course my bots decided to be morons and stand off in their own place and go down, because I was trying to get them all to come into this corner, which is a very good holdout spot. If my time playing Destiny has taught me anything, it's that Coach isn't a cheeseburger apocalypse, he's just a fucking burger, bro. So I toss a bile out so that the commons stop going after us while we get him up, and unfortunately a spitter decides to come and troll and basically just waste all of the time that bought us. So that's fun. Fortunately the bile does last long enough anyway, and we're able to finally get back into our corner and do the actual holdout. I also spot these 2 gas cans, which will be very helpful for the tanks later on. And after quite a while of camping in our corner, I eventually get pulled by a really bullshit smoker. Like, dude, what is this? And of course my teammates decided to just watch me hang there for several seconds before punching me. But fortunately it was about to be tank time, so they picked me up during the little bit of downtime, and we were ready to go and fight the tank. Of course the bots, being the dumbasses they are, they didn't come outside with me for some reason, but we were able to get the tank on fire and start kiting him around. So he ended up going down without too much of an issue because the two bots that were inside kind of held their own while Coach and I dealt with the tank. Which is definitely an interesting dynamic because normally all the bots just blindly follow you. Unfortunately though, I get grabbed by this charger and he starts beating the shit out of me, but the tank is either already dead or distracted by somebody else, and the chargers don't actually do very much damage. So the bots super slowly eventually kill the charger and are able to get me up. And after that, I got back to our spot where I was preparing to take on the second wave of the horde. Of course, once again on the way back, one of the bots decided to go down instead of coming towards me, so we had to go and deal with that yet again. This time, however, I'd already used up the bile, so we had to deal with the horde on top of trying to get everybody up and moving them back to the room. And I was going through a lot of medkits trying to get through this, and was now down to the last one, with Rochelle down in the other room, because once again, she just refused to follow everybody else, because, you know, why not? And at this point, due to the lack of healing, the bots were now black and white or dead, and I was left with a one-shot Rochelle to take on the next fight, which is a double tank fight, the only one in the game. The second tank fight of this mission specifically spawns in two tanks at the same time, and right away Rochelle just decides to take a rock straight to the face and leave me alone to kite the two tanks. And fortunately I'm able to get the tanks on fire, which means that it's just a matter of time before they go down, and once these tanks are done, we're going to be able to leave the mission. But unfortunately, during the tank fight, I get huntered out of almost nowhere, and don't have enough time to react, killing me. So yeah, dying right at the end of the finale after almost 5 minutes of gameplay. Woo! Yeah. This time around, however, I didn't make the same mistakes. I started the fight much sooner, which preserved a little bit of health packs because of the bots just taking chip damage last time. On top of that, the ammo spawned in a much better spot for us to actually make use of it between waves. So we made our way into our corner and started off the finale for real this time. Yeah, the exit there at the end was one of the most terrifying I've ever done. Normally you're able to just run straight through there and get past everything being fast enough, but that definitely wasn't the case there. We were already being swarmed and the tank spawned right on top of the door this time. So I ended up having to run away, failed to shoot a gas cam behind me, and then grabbed a bile that I knew I'd left behind and used that to distract all the commons, all the while knowing that the tank was going to be following me, leading him in a loop that would let me get around him to the ship. So yeah, this was an absolutely insane campaign, and to be honest, this was probably the second easiest of the entire game. Things were about to get a whole lot worse, because we're about to go into Dark Carnival. And this is one that many consider to be the hardest in the entire game. But as long as you come into it somewhat prepared and with a plan ahead of time, I don't think that's the case. We've got another one coming up that I think is a lot harder. But the first mission, as with most of them, is a pretty easy one here. So I hop my way down this slope, getting a bunch of speed for it. This game does have b-hopping, but it's insanely hard to do because you're not allowed to scroll wheel to do it. And basically it's because if you do jump inputs too fast, it just thinks you're holding the jump button, which won't let you do any b-hops. So you have to perfectly time them, but if you do, you can get some crazy speed in this game. You'll see that I'm juggling a gas can on our way into the motel, and this is because you're pretty likely to get a tank in this mission. But as you'll see, I have a boomer bile, which is actually very important for getting through a later mission in this campaign. And for whatever reason, on this campaign in specific, you're just not able to get boomer biles outside of the first and last mission, so you're just totally left high and dry on boomer biles for the second, third, and fourth mission. So I'm going to be relying on gas cans or very conveniently placed Molotovs to be able to take out tanks a little bit later on in the mission, and I end up getting boomered on while I'm in this room. But fortunately, this is a decent spot to hold out against the horde, and we're able to handle it fairly effectively. Since I'm boomered and my teammates aren't, they're not going to take a lot of damage because all the infected will be after me, so we have a great choke point here to just kill everything. The game decides to absolutely troll me here by giving me a second boomer bile, which would have been amazing to have a teammate carry into a later level so that we could use two, because there's really two spots that you really want to have a bile for in this mission, but you can only have one solo. So we had to leave it behind, and I kind of get swarmed after jumping down the hill, but we are eventually able to get out of it, and with okay health. And of course, with my luck, we get a tank in the single worst spot that you possibly could in this campaign, down in the river. So fire isn't going to work on him very well, and also there's a bunch of spots where he will just outrun us because of the water slowdown penalty. So I chug my pills and start getting into kiting, but right away, two of my bots are already down, presumably because they got stuck in the water. But after a lot of kiting and a very close call right here where I get stuck in the water and then have a comment on me, we're able to take down the tank and keep pushing forward in the mission. And since we still have 3 health packs, we're actually in a decent condition health-wise as well, even though everybody's pretty low right now because they just went down. But before we finished off, I murdered Ellis in cold blood because he had low health and no health pack, so he would respawn at half health, which is more than what he had right now, which would give us a little bit of an advantage going into the next map. And Chapter 2 started well enough, although Nick decided to be a fucking moron and walk into my bullets, which was really cool. But we were good to keep moving. And I found a sword in this building, which is pretty much the best melee weapon in the game. It just has every positive attribute and no real negatives, so yeah, we'll be using that for the rest of the campaign. And the effect of these bots being fucking idiots is kind of starting to show, but we still have enough medkits to kind of keep things together. And as long as you kind of do your best to position them well, things can turn out okay. Although sometimes you just end up in situations like this where you're in a good spot, but they decide to just stand out in the open, and all you can do is try your best to protect them. And you can see, just like in this situation, shit just keeps on spawning. Obviously, it just happened here because a boomer hit all my teammates. But I don't know, sometimes situations like this just feel like they take forever. And yeah, this was a great use of literally my entire team's health while I didn't take a single hit of damage because I knew where to stand. And here I showed the fallacy of room clearing with one person, where I looked the wrong way first and got instantly charged for it and lost all of my health. So that was pretty cool. At least it was a charger and not like a hunter, because the hunter probably would have just downed me here. But yeah, at this point, with the lack of health kits, I'm going to need to stretch out my health pretty far because this mission is a decently long one. Fortunately though, there are pills just all over the place in this map, so we can live on those for the rest of the map as long as we play our health decently. In the amusement park, I got downed when I got boomered, so after we cleared out the horde here, I decided to use up my health kit here, and now I would have only pills to finish off the rest of the level, but that's okay because we're at over the halfway point now. And once we get up here, I get completely trolled by the commons and take 2 stupid hits that I definitely could have avoided. Ultimately, I should have just been bashing and using my shotgun instead of trying to sword stuff here, but yeah, that's what I get. But fortunately, the endless supply of pills on this map makes it still not too bad, even despite the ridiculous amount of damage I've taken. And now we were ready for the carousel run. This is the first of the 3 big crescendos throughout this campaign, and it is also the easiest one by far, so we won't be using up our bile on it. Even though the bile would make it a lot easier to use, we want to save it for one of the harder crescendos that will be coming up later. But you can see right away my bots just get ripped apart, and at first I try to kind of hang back and let them catch up to me, but this ends up just getting me swarmed, and Ellis is about to die anyway. Really what I should have been doing is just running straight towards the carousel so that I could shut it off and stop the zombies spawning, but in this case my teammates actually managed to eat all their pills, get back to decent health quickly, and come and pick me up, so GG by them. And now we're set to just rush straight towards the thing. I go ahead and just pop my adrenaline for now so I can run, and we rush down the trigger to turn off the carousel, which will stop the zombies from spawning. And from there, it's a pretty easy walk into the safe room. And now we're into Tunnel of Love. This ended up being the hardest mission in the entire game for me, so we're gonna have some fun with this one. Well, a lot of people would say that the 4th chapter is harder than this one. Because I was using the bile there and not here, this one ended up being harder for me. But in theory, if I used the bile here, then this would have been easy, and then the 4th one would have been even harder than this was. Or at least that's the idea behind it. And we get a tank spawn here pretty much right away, but fortunately this isn't the worst place to fight a tank because there's plenty of space for us to just keep backpedaling the bots while they shoot him. We also have these little things we can jump over that can get him stuck in climbing animations, so this ends up being a decent spot. I decided to run back here and clear out all the commons so that the bots can hang out back here and shoot the tank more. And apparently Nick was just black and white holding onto a med kit and decided not to use it because I just noticed he died here. I actually didn't realize that when I was playing, I just noticed that here in editing, so that's pretty funny. Good job, buddy. But we were able to get tank taken care of, and we would find Nick a little bit later on in a closet anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And after opening this door, I was met by your mom. So after getting past her, we were nearly ready to get out of the Tunnel of Love. Of course, not without the bots just being fucking idiots again, because, you know, that's what they do. They're just in a constant state of going down to commons. It is what it is. It's kind of funny because they're actually really good at defending themselves against specials for the most part, so their biggest weakness just being commons is so silly to me. And after dropping down this hole, I was met by your mom. Wait, I already made that joke. And now we were outside, finally. And we do fortunately get this lovely cabinet full of pills, which will help us out for sure. And a horde decided to start just as we were ready to start the coaster, so I went ahead and hit it because stacking up hordes doesn't actually cause any problems in this game. Since there is a cap on the number of zombies that can exist at once, it doesn't actually make the hordes any harder when you overlap them. So the idea behind the coaster is you have to follow this very thin set path for you, and you have to go on it for quite a while before you can eventually stop the alarm that's causing an endless horde. The real issue here isn't even the commons though, they're not that bad. It's that these specials seem to just spawn endlessly. I had situations where I would kill a hunter and then another hunter would spawn and then I'd kill that and then a third hunter would spawn like seconds apart. And the same would happen with smokers or chargers or just whatever was the least convenient thing in the moment. And that ended up causing me a lot of problems. On top of that, the bots really like to just stop and fight, and that is not what you're supposed to do on this area. You're very much so intended to just shove the zombies to the side and run past them, and that is extra important because if you leave them alive, then they won't be spawning in front of you, they'll just be, you know, running behind you, not causing any problems. But with the bots' desire to kill everything they see, they keep spawning more zombies in front of us, which also isn't helping. Eventually we get into this area, and while Ellis has gone down, my teammates are both still alive, and I'm trying to let them catch up to me. But this is the last curve before we can go and turn off the alarm, so we're super close to getting this finished on our first try. So I look back and see that my bots are with me and start to push forward. We have to be pretty careful here because we're very low on health. I can only take 2 hits from commons even though I'm still green, and both of my teammates are one shot. Since Nick went down, I now know that Rochelle will not be leaving this spot, but she was black and white anyway and just fucking died, so it wasn't really a problem. But this hunter decided that he was going to claw me while being stumbled, so fuck me I guess. Thank you, Gabe. And in the next try, I had a witch sitting directly on top of where we needed to go through, so I decided to light her up on fire with a gas tank and run away from her for a while. I didn't have a shotgun to just insta-kill her with, so I had to do it this way instead, but it ended up working out for me, and she went down without too much of a problem. And now we're ready to take on the coaster, this time for real. And it starts off as every good coaster run does, with one of my teammates going down to a common. But don't worry because today we got the buy 3 get 1 free discount and all my teammates went down. So I had a decision to make. I could either go back and try to save them during the Endless Horde, or I could try to just solo the rest of the mission since we're almost at the end. And I decided to do that because the bots are just terrible in this section anyway, and I already have decent health. And immediately I start getting swarmed by the commons, even though my teammates are still alive right there. Go after them, dude. Come on. And yeah, I get downed by the Horde, unfortunately. But in my next try, I'm not playing around, and we make it to the coaster even with one of our teammates on green health, which is super good. And at this point, I'm absolutely locked in, and I have been taking the AK over the shotgun here because, just like you saw with that smoker, they are a pretty common problem. So we drop down here, and we're able to run past this part without having too much of a problem. And we get revenge on the hunter that trolled us last time, is what I would have said if there wasn't a second one. What the fuck? And with that very tense situation cleared, we made it into the safe room, and we're just waiting on our teammates to die now because I am not going back out there. And getting into the 4th chapter of the campaign, we have a super hard area to clear here at the start, so every time I have to reset, it'll take absolutely forever. And eventually we'd make our way through the bumper cars, where I would get trolled by this charger that gives me a little love tap. And yeah, he managed to knock me over so I couldn't immediately save our teammate, and she got downed. And on top of that, because the charger does splash damage, everybody is super low health now. Yay! On our way out, there was a witch, and normally whenever you have a full team, people would either go one at a time or all at the exact same time to not set her off. But remember, the bots are fucking stupid, so Nick just died. Good job, buddy. Good going. And before going into the barns, we had a bit of a horde, but we had this little room to set up in, which helped out. Or at least I did. My teammates decided to stand out in the open and just take a bunch of unnecessary damage. And not too long after that, we had a tank fight. And we were down a man because we were never able to get Nick back up before he spawned. So this was going to be a little bit harder than normal. But fortunately there was a pretty open area for us to kite him around. But we also didn't have any access to fire this time, which was unfortunate. But Rochelle decided to eat concrete, which meant that Ellis was going to absolutely die trying to save her no matter what. So this wasn't going well. And eventually, I think I was absorbing the contagious stupid from my teammates or something, and I decided to eat concrete too. So that was this run chalked. And like I said, every time I have to leave the safe room, I have to do this shit over and over, every time, because otherwise the bots will just take a bunch of damage trying to run past them. But this time around we were able to get through the barn and start heading on top of the roofs, at least after sniping down this hunter. And just like that, we were ready to start the final crescendo of the mission, and right away Ellis starts it off well by getting downed and forcing all of the bots to come down from the safe spot instead of leaving him to die like he deserved. But don't worry, he gets killed really fast anyway, but not without taking down the other 2 bots with him. And with all of the bots already downed and literally no way of getting them in this chaos, I just had to hope that I could get through this on my own. I held out for a while and eventually the doors opened up for me, so I threw my bile and started making my run for it. And right as I was getting towards the end and about to make it in, this charger just popped up out of nowhere and fucking pounded me. So that was another reset. And right at the end this time. But once I got back for a 3rd time, we actually had a medkit and pills sitting up here, which is a pretty nice thing to have. So hopefully this time we'd be able to make our way through it. So I started it, the bots jumped down with me, and I tried my best to get them to come back up here. I stood in this spot because I could block one of the main places that the zombies like to climb up, and this made it so I didn't have to watch behind me, I only had to watch in front of me and cover my bots the best I could. Only Nick was staying with me, But once Ellis went down, nobody was staying with me anymore. And this was just kind of a problem with this encounter. The only safe space is a place that the bots don't like to be. But the doors opened, so I went ahead and threw my bile, which would hopefully allow the bots to get themselves up. And I popped my adrenaline, used up my healing kit just like I did when I got through the coaster, and started my run through. There weren't a lot of commons here because they were all back on the bile, so it was only the couple that I was killing respawning in front of me. This time I had a boomer in front of me instead of a charger, which was definitely a welcome change, and a spitter as well. So there were no pinning infected, so there was no risk that I got killed. And immediately I just closed the door and was gonna just let my teammates die. But hey, they actually made it in, so that's cool. And of course, just to start off this map really well, Ellis decides to go down before we even begin the finale. And this finale is going to be a holdout section similar to Swamp Fever. This time there isn't a double tank, but the arena is a little bit scarier, because there's no real good choke points to funnel the enemies into. Fortunately though, we have almost an endless source of fire with all these fireworks boxes, so it should be really easy to take on all the tanks. I started off by trying to hold out up here because this is what I do whenever I'm playing with other players most of the time, but unfortunately the bots don't do a very good job of following me. In fact, they all just stand in the single location that I can't help them from. I sit in the specific spot here so that I can stand over the enemies trying to climb up under me, but as you can see that just doesn't end up working out well for me. And with my teammates' inability to operate a ladder, I end up dead. In the next try, I go to this spot where we only have to defend two sides, but my bots just seem to want to constantly switch the directions they're shooting instead of actually shooting their guns, and then a spitter hits us and everything just kind of goes to hell, so this spot doesn't end up working very well for us either. And after killing the first tank without really anything interesting happening, I decided to go to this spot on the left side of the stage instead, and this ends up actually being a pretty solid spot. The zombies only approach us from behind going down these stairs there to the back side of the stage, and other than that they pretty much only approach from the front and side, so there aren't a lot of channels for them to get to us. So with some good setup of gas cans and fireworks, we actually have a pretty solid spot here. But unfortunately this jockey decides to jump straight through Nick and onto me instead, and he ends up downing me because why would the bots help me? They're busy being swarmed by 4 commons. But don't worry, Ellis will save us! This time though, I wasn't playing around, so I went and found the guaranteed bile that spawns before the finale area, and got these gas cans set up in some good spots to take on the horde and the tanks. And wasted no time this time, starting the finale and getting to our spot. Well, this spot still wasn't as good as everybody being up on the tower together and just shooting down anything that can threaten that. But fortunately the bots are kind of like turrets, and they're really good at just shooting down anything as long as you give them a decent place to stand. Like you could see there, they killed the charger before I could even get to it with my sword. And not too long later, the first tank spawned, and we were ready to take him on. The nice thing about this arena is while it's hard to get a good spot for the commons, open areas are great for taking on tanks, so this is probably the easiest finale for taking on tanks. And we ended up taking him down in record time with only one person going down, so not too bad. But we weren't done yet, we still had a whole other wave of commons and another tank to take on before we would be done here, so I ammoed up and we got ready to get back to our spot. And during the horde I got to absolutely style on this hunter, which I had fun with. And he was nice enough to not even melee me while he was mid-stumble this time. What a cool guy. I decided to throw a pipe bomb as we were getting to the end of the horde, so that way we didn't have any commons surprise us during the next tank fight, but we were getting ready to push into the end of this finale. And things were going well for us, even the bots seemed like they had my back after getting this hunter off of me without letting him do any damage. But we had another tank to finish off before we could get out of here, so I set up the fuel can and was able to light him on fire. From there, I just had to keep the bots away from him the best I could, and we'd be able to get out of here. The tank ended up taking down Nick, but at this point he was going to be low on health and ended up dying. Now all we had to do was wait for the helicopter, which was going to show up momentarily, and I had the bile that I had been holding on to get to it safely. I also just sniped off the boomer there, which meant that we weren't going to have a boomer counteracting our bile here, so things were all set for us. So I ran my way towards the helicopter as fast as I could, leaving behind the bots, as I do. They're not people, who cares? I would have been cooler if they were people though. And from here, because it is possible for a tank to glitch into the helicopter sometimes, I opt to just shoot down Nick and Rochelle so that way we get to leave sooner. And with that, we finished off Dark Carnival solo on Expert. And with that done, we had just 2 left. And these 2 campaigns were not easy ones either. But it was time for us to tackle the Parish. And this place was pretty cool because it spawned us with brass knuckles, so I got to go punch the shit out of stuff with Coach, which is awesome. But this mission isn't a very hard one, there's no crescendo or anything, and it's a relatively short one, so we'll get through it without too many problems. And a whole lot of nothing later, and we'd made it to the safe room. And this mission was complete, at least after killing a couple zombies. We got in there. At least, eventually. These guys decide to get stuck right outside the safe room and can't just make their way in. Then a bunch of zombies spawn behind me inside the safe room, which is just absolutely insane. So I end up closing the door on them outside, so that way they aren't getting hit in the back and I'm not losing more health. And it just turns into this crazy clusterfuck. Eventually, I end up just killing the 2 downed guys just because I want to get this over with. And there, we actually made it through now. And getting into Chapter 2, things are a little bit more interesting because we have our first crescendo event in the form of the tower run. And we make our way into the park where we take out a couple of special infected and grab a boomer bile, which is going to be super handy for the upcoming crescendo event. Of course, this means that we don't have a Molotov for the tank anymore, but we could probably take him on without it, or we'll even get lucky and have a gas tank or a Molotov near the area that we fight him. And after clearing the park, we get to this area, which actually always has 2 guaranteed first aid kits, and we got another boomer bile because why not? But since I'm doing this solo, I'm the only one that can carry grenades, so we're not going to be able to make use of that bile in future missions. And now we're ready to start the run from the trailer to deactivate the alarm that just happened when we opened it. And this is supposed to be a relatively easy one, at least it is whenever you have 4 players. But I got the bile off before going down here, which meant that the commons wouldn't also be on us. But my teammates do just absolutely get destroyed by a charger here. But fortunately they were able to get me up thanks to the boomer bile, which would have been great if this hunter didn't kill me 10 seconds later. So back to it again, clear out this area, go through the park, grab the medkits, use them up, blah blah blah. Now we're back. I take this process in a lot of missions throughout this run, so it's just kind of how it goes. But not too long later, and we are back on the run, and we have some specials early on over here, but I'm able to take care of them without too much problem. And once I start getting hung up, I go ahead and toss my boomer bile to get everything off of me, and make my way towards the tower. And I get up here, I press the button, which is going to stop the horde, at least eventually. I come over to this spot because it's actually a little bit of a god spot for myself, so only the specials are going to be able to make it to me. But this also means that the bots can't make their way to me, unlike what other players could, so I have to make sure to defend them. There's basically 2 ways to play this. You can either just run through after the door opens immediately, or you can kill enemies for a really long time, and eventually the horde does actually stop. So we clear things until there was an opening, and we start making our way out. I wait in this spot a bit for the bots to catch up because they all take stupid routes. And we eventually end up here at the safe room. Not before just destroying this jockey's career though. And the spitter too, nice. I guess all the specials just wanted to come hang out, and then Rochelle decided to be really smart and stand in my way, so I just fucking killed her. Deserved. But not too much of a fight there, and we were able to move into the next level. And this one was a fun one. So this one actually doesn't have a crescendo, but it is one of the longest missions in the game still. And it definitely has some scary segments, so it's not easy just because it doesn't have a button you have to press for an infinite horde. We had a horde spawn while I just happened to have all the bots in this RV, and since this is the only entrance to my knowledge, it ended up being really easy to defend this horde, which I thought was pretty funny because normally we have to just take these out in the open because the bots are big stupid idiot heads. And not long later, we hopped down into the sewers. I did hit a pretty funny blind fire here because I heard the hunter noises and just shot down the only path that he could have been, and sure enough got the kill. And apparently there were some more specials here. I couldn't see them, but the bots were shooting them pretty accurately. And soon we were up into the parking lot. And this place is scary on full teams because it's very likely that somebody ends up shooting a car. But with 3 bots and them not being able to hit the cars even if they do actually hit them, all I had to do was play it a little bit safe myself and mostly rely on melees where I could, and I'd be able to get through this without any issues. Up top we get to visit this ambulance, which has a bunch of medical supplies for us, which is super good because our teammates love to just absolutely eat all of the supplies. So this is a good way to restock. And with that, we were navigating the cemetery as the last part of the mission. And the interesting thing about the cemetery is RNG actually has a bunch of different paths that you can be forced to take throughout here. So it will feel different every time you're going through it until you've done it like hundreds of times. And since I haven't, I didn't really know where I was going and got lost for a while. But eventually we were able to make it through and nothing really crazy happened. So with all of that knocked out, we were ready to get into the safe room and get to the next mission of the Parish. Here on the quarter we have a pretty hard crescendo event coming up, and the entire layout of this mission is also a little bit rough because basically the mission zigzags in on itself, which means that even when you leave zombies behind in the dust, they have a very easy time catching up to you, which is a little bit unusual compared to other missions in the game. This didn't end up being the biggest deal though, mainly because we were just killing everything we ran into anyway because I'm playing with the bots and we're pretty much just doing a John Wick percent anyway. And in no time at all, we were able to get to the crescendo event and get it started. Basically, we had to push a button that was loud that would move a platform for us to progress through the mission. So we were going to just wait under this spot because it's a pretty effective place for holding out. The zombies only approach from the two sides and they don't do a very good job of climbing up, so it's not too bad to handle. And on top of that, I set up some effective gas cans as well. And once the platform got there, I decided to throw a pipe bomb and make a run for it, but that wasn't the best idea. My teammates ended up getting hit by the special infected and dragged down, and I ended up having to hold out a lot more, but now from a less effective position than I was in before. So Nick got down by the charger, and we still had this horde kind of on us that was left over from the initial event. And yeah, I don't know what it was, the bots were just being total derps here. Fortunately, I just popped in adrenaline, and with all three teammates here, I was able to get them up really quickly using it. There's actually an achievement for doing this 10 times, which I think is pretty cool, because this is actually a surprisingly effective strategy. But we ended up just clearing everything out, for better or for worse, and now we were ready to move on to the next section. And on the way out, I found this convenient pipe bomb that we could use to cruise the rest of the way to the safe room, at least for the most part. So we cleared out the street here, and we're able to just run past this part, which is normally filled with commons all over the place, so that was kind of nice. And speaking of filling things, I would appreciate if you guys filled me up with subscribers. That would be great, thank you. Mandatory statement about how people aren't subscribed to me, boo-hoo. And with all of that taken care of, we made it to the safe room and we're ready to get into the finale. And if you guys didn't already know, the Parish finale is considered by many to be the easiest in the entire game because you can just run past everything in it. So of course that meant that I would proceed to die a whole bunch here. Why not? But eventually, I'd be able to get through it. And the real difficult part here was just that the bots didn't like to keep up. When you're playing with a full person group, everybody can kind of keep up pretty well, and everybody's pretty good at running past enemies where it's possible. The real problem is just that the bots will get caught up on the littlest of things, and once one of them goes down, they would rather face CIA torture than leave them behind. So we basically have to play this super slowly, which is not how you're intended to do this mission. As you can see, I'm struggling with the horde here on my own because the bots are just back doing whatever the hell. And generally, it's better to just try to run through this mission quickly because a lot of the specials will just get stuck behind you if you run fast enough, so it's not even that risky to do it solo. But eventually, I do get trolled when running past this hole, and a smoker manages to pull me off, and I get stuck. And at first, I think this is just going to be another death, but the bots actually manage to catch up to me. And they end up saving the day, so that's pretty cool. And this ended up being the dynamic I would go with. Basically, I leave behind the bots, and most of these zombies get stuck chasing me, leaving the bots somewhat unhindered. And eventually, I get caught up in everything, and then the bots catch up and clear everything off me and save me. And it worked pretty well for the most part, so yeah. You can come back to this ambulance and loot a bunch of medical supplies, which is very helpful. And pretty soon, we end up having this tank that we have to deal with. Fortunately, because it is the Parish finale, you can just run right past him as you'd expect. But sometimes you'll have to bait him away from this ladder, but in this case he was nice to me. I did have to dodge that rock though, and if I just kept going straight, he would have hit me, because the tank AI is insanely good at leading its rock throws. You have to change directions or you'll get hit every time. And it doesn't matter how far away you are, they lead their shots perfectly. It's actually amazing. But not too long after getting past him, we are at the final stretch now, and we have a pipe bomb to get any commons off of us that we may need to. At this point, all of the bots are down, so if a special gets me, it's game over. But we're so close now, and so far ahead of most of the horde, that it shouldn't be a problem. So we run our way to the helicopter with basically no resistance. And you can see I keep looking at the bridge because the tank can throw rocks at you from there. And yes, I've died to that before. But it wasn't a problem this time, and we made it to the helicopter and were able to escape the Parish. And now we are on to Hard Rain, and the last one I decided to do for this video, and that was because I thought Hard Rain would probably be the hardest one to do. But to be entirely real with you guys, it really wasn't. So you start off this campaign with a bunch of extra items, and most of the safe rooms also have extra items because you're expected to use each of the safe rooms twice. But you end up getting so many extra items, especially early on here, like having throwables in the safe area here because it's also the finale area, it ended up making things a whole lot easier. So while we did have this crazy horde right off the bat just ripping through all my teammates' healths, it didn't really matter. And we wound up getting a tank very early on in the mission here, which is also kind of a nice thing to have. And I end up finding these propane cans, which can also be used to stumble the tank, which is a super funny thing to do, so I go ahead and set it up. Basically, you just toss it near him and shoot him, and as you can see, he's kind of just stuck there for a few seconds, confused about what just happened. And we're gonna do it again, just to fuck with him. This isn't even worth doing instead of just shooting him, but I just think it was funny to bully the tank a little bit, and show off the fairly obscure mechanic that you don't get to use very often in this game. But yeah, the tank ended up obliterating Rochelle and then instantly dying. Kind of a base thing to do if you think about it. And a little bit later on, we find Rochelle in the closet, and I also note down that there was an adrenaline in the ambulance there, which will be useful for the trip back, because there's going to be water all over the place, and adrenaline lets you run through it like normal. I also got access to an auto shotty here, which was really nice to have. And not too much happened before we made our way into the safe room, and we're ready to finish off the level. But I did go back and murder a few teammates, because those fools dared to be under 50 health and not have medkits on them. And the next mission was the Sugar Mill, which is one that I thought would be difficult because it is the only one in the game that just spams a bunch of witches all over the place. And remember, in Expert, the witch will just instantly kill you. It doesn't even give you a chance to be downed, you just die. While I wasn't too worried about myself hitting the witches, the issue was more so the bots just constantly getting picked off and having no recourse to it since they would be instantly dead. But before we could worry about that, we had a tank to deal with, and of course Nick decided he wanted to eat concrete at the very start, but for whatever reason the bots decided to keep kiting instead of trying to revive him, which was super cool of them. Normally they would just all basically go AFK over his body trying to revive him, but look at Rochelle go, she's actually bobbing and weaving his shit, look at that. And the tank went down super quick because of that. And there wasn't a lot happening throughout this mission, but I did manage to knock a hunter out of the air, which is always a fun thing to do. And while we had seen some witches, none of them ended up giving us any problems. We were able to just get past them without any issues. I think part of that is that most of the witches in this segment are standing witches, which basically don't react to you being near them at all. So you could just run right past them like it's nothing. It's the sitting witches that tend to cause actual problems. Pretty soon in, we were able to get to the elevator here, which we were going to have to call and wait on to get up here. I had carried a bile to this point and had a pipe bomb sitting around here, so we were definitely set. My goal was to have either one or the other for getting through the corn maze at the other side of the elevator, but just in case we needed it, I went ahead and had the pipe bomb ready to go here. That way, if we started getting swarmed, I could get the comments off of my teammates really quickly. And the spot I'm set up in ends up being a pretty good one. Most of the specials will just climb up that pillar like the boomer did as you saw earlier, and the bots tend to be able to keep their back to a wall, which is always a great way of handling hordes of comments. But eventually we were able to get into the elevator, navigate through the corn maze, and make our way into the safe room, finishing off this round. And starting off this mission, we get a katana in the safe room, which always makes me happy. At this point, we're backtracking through the previous two levels, but now they're full of water and the path is a little bit different. Since we have a bunch of throwables sitting in the safe room, I toss a pipe bomb outside to clear out most of the enemies, and then I grab a bile to continue through. This time we don't have a crescendo because the elevator is already down for us and it doesn't trigger a horde or anything, but the bile is still just nice to have if we do get swarmed by a horde, that way we can just get them away from us and run from them. While going through the cornfield, a tank spawns, and I end up running back towards the gas station hoping my teammates stay with me, and we take the tank fight around here this time. This is probably the best place you could get the tank to spawn in the entire mission, because if he spawns later on, there's even more water everywhere than there is here, and it can get really scary quickly. And this time the team does a great job of avoiding the tank with me, and we're able to take him down without too much of a problem. And after going back up the elevator, we start going back through the sugar mill, and this time most of the witches are gone, so it ends up honestly being easier than it was on the way through. Of course, we have to deal with the rainstorms and the water everywhere slowing us down, but since we already took the tank on, all there was is just going to be regular specials and some commons in our way, which isn't really that big of a deal. The pipe bomb I threw ended up pissing off a witch somehow, but fortunately Rochelle decides to eat her for me, and I don't have to take the death for it, because once the witch kills somebody, she'll just run away from you and you don't have to deal with her anymore. Right towards the end, we had a horde spawn while we were in a terrible position, so I decided to just take an adrenaline and run past everyone into the safe room. And this ended up working out for me, as I made it in safe and sound and just had to wait for my teammates to either make it or die. And hilariously, in this mission, we had a tank spawn pretty much the moment that I leave the safe room, and immediately just I eat concrete. I was not ready for it. Fortunately, he was really far away when he threw that rock, and my teammates were able to get me up before he could close in and start killing them. So with that, I took my pills, and I was back to decent enough health to handle the tank fight. And once again, this was kind of a good time to do the tank fight, because we're early on in the mission, and there is a solid amount of ground we can use that isn't just covered in water like there would be later on. And while he did end up downing all of my teammates after the fact, he was killed and I could get them back up. Wow, I really had to sneeze there. Okay. But yeah, I revived all my teammates and we were able to keep pushing on in the level. And since this was just the inverse of the first level, there were no crescendos or anything like that. And I think the lack of crescendo events throughout the missions, especially the later ones, is really what made them so much easier than the other missions in the game, where you have to do a bunch of stuff involving the comments. Well, the rain was definitely a difficult modifier, making it so that we couldn't see a lot of the time, and the water slowing us down all over the place. Ultimately, it just wasn't as bad as having to deal with infinite hordes. And pretty much nothing else happened for the rest of the mission, so we made our way into the safe room after a whole bunch of walking, and we're ready to get into the finale. And I think the funniest thing about this is I run into a katana on top of the building here, which meant that we could have had a sword for the entire campaign if I'd checked up here, but I just didn't, so it's been sitting here the whole time. And the finale ends up being probably the hardest of all the finales if you ask me, and is also easily the hardest part of the entire campaign here, because you have to do your standard holdout fight, but this time you're confined to a little tiny building, and you're surrounded by deep water that would make you run really slowly if you go into it. And just to add on top of that, you have the random storms that take away your vision. Well, it's not so bad for handling the horde. The tanks are another story, with this being probably the smallest area that you have in the entire game to fight a tank in. But there is still enough space and enough obstacles up here to kite him around pretty effectively, but the unfortunate part is that if you try to burn him, most of the time he'll drop back down into the water, making Molotovs very ineffective against him. But with the firepower of 4 bots, we were able to take out this one without too much trouble. Unfortunately though, one of them got killed early on, which meant that we were going to have to do the rest of the entire finale without her. I will say editing these finales is kind of difficult because you literally just go back and forth with a tank and a horde twice, and there just really isn't a lot to the horde sections. You're just shooting zombies from a relatively safe spot. So I did that for a while, and then this tank showed up and I was actually able to get a Molotov onto him and get some decent fire damage on him while we were kiting him, which is great. I don't think I ever explained it, but tanks will stay on fire forever unless they have a specific way of extinguishing it, so it's a very effective thing for taking them down. Of course, eventually he dipped his toes in the water, putting out the fire on him, but we were still able to kill him without too much of a problem, and I had a boomer bile that I had been holding on to make it to the rescue boat. And I just realized editing this, the tank wasn't dead yet. Whoops. I'll leave this in though, it's kind of funny. And one dead tank later, we revived our boy Coach, and we're ready for the boat to pull up. The scary part about this finale in specific is that the ending segment, where they spam hordes and tanks at the same time at you while the rescue boat waits for you, has a huge delay before the boat is actually accessible, while the horde and tank are still already there. So if you wait where the boat is going to be, you will almost certainly get attacked by a tank and have no recourse. So that's why I stayed up here and waited quite a while before actually moving towards where the boat was, because otherwise I could end up in that situation where you make it all the way to the end just to get killed waiting for the boat to get there. But eventually I saw the boat was in place and I made my escape. And with that, we finished Hard Rain, which was the final mission for us in our solo expert playthrough of all the main campaigns from Left 4 Dead 2. And that's going to be all the actual gameplay from the video, because we made it. And I know most people just came here to watch the gameplay, but I did want to talk to you guys just a little bit, especially my people who are staying with me after I quit Destiny. I know a lot of you guys are still playing and would probably like for me to go back. But I wasn't having a good time with the game, and for a really long time there towards the end, I felt like I was only playing the game to make videos, and it was starting to feel forced for me, and that's not something I wanted to do. I remember specifically some of the videos I would get comments saying they were impressed by how quickly I was able to turn a video around after doing an LFG with them, and I realized that that was actually just because of a lack of quality. Normally in my videos, they take me a while to make because I edit them very specifically. A lot of the time I do stuff that isn't super obvious. It's things like timing out the music and choosing what clips to do. And I just wasn't putting as much effort into that in those videos. And it was those comments telling me how quick I was that made me realize that. YouTube really hates it when you change topics on your channel. So I am really grateful to everybody who's staying with me, even though I am going to be transitioning away from Destiny. I decided against making a quitting Destiny video just because those are so memed on, and a lot of the time they're just false too. You know, we can all count the like hundreds of videos that creators have made where they didn't actually quit Destiny, but they said they were gonna. I mean it, and I don't need to make a video about it. I'm just going to do it. And I also have some stuff going on outside of gaming too. If you guys didn't know, for a while I've been a journalist. I do local news where I live. But I've started to get a little bit, I don't know, bored, unsatisfied with that. And in my job, I've spent a lot of time around police officers and people in the emergency response scene. And it kind of made me want to join that and become a police officer. So I've applied for an entrance exam for one of my local PDs. If I do make it in, I expect I'm going to have a lot less time to make videos. But I certainly don't plan on stopping making them, although the frequency may be reduced. But we have a long time before that's decided, so for now, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and just playing the games that I have fun in. I think I'm going to do a Borderlands video here pretty soon, although I'm not entirely sure. I might take a break and do another Doom video in between those, just because those are kind of the best non-Destiny videos I've had. So we'll see where it takes me. If you guys want to stay in contact with me, you can always join my Discord server. I'll have it linked in the description down below. And if you sat through and just listened to all this, thank you very much. You guys do mean the world to me. I never thought I would end up having the platform I do. And even though, 6,500 subs isn't massive, and I'm still a nobody in the grand scheme of things, getting to see all of you guys in the comments and talking to you in my Discord and everything like that has been such a great experience in my life. So, thank you all for being here, and I hope to see you in future videos.